guest from Yes We Cannibal. Welcome to this week's edition of Beat.
You know, what's interesting is that, and I kind of just found this out recently, the Sun Ra wrote all of his lines. You know, I'm pretty sure that John Schwed says that in his book, but I had forgotten that Sun Ra wrote all of his lines in this film. And, you know, of course, he stayed in character throughout the filming. It started out as a project where the producer, Jim Newman, had been asked to create, you know, a series of performance pieces. And then the performance pieces were going to be bridged together with some dramatic, you know, little interstitial sketches, you know, skits. That's what we call them, right? And that was then kicked to, wait a second, I wrote down. It was Josh Smith was the person that was asked to actually write a full screenplay for the film that he was, you know, a film student, maybe in community college or something, and wrote the full expanded screenplay. So I saw the film in the basement of one of my co-authors on the P-Funk book, Larry Alexander. I saw it in his basement not too long after Sun Ra had left the planet, you know, when his absence was still kind of, you know, really felt like an absence, really felt like a wound. And it was, and of course, what I saw was this VHS version, which was the Sun Ra, we call it the Sun Ra edit, the one that doesn't have the tit scenes and the sex. So I don't know if you had sex, then you had the director's cut, and I don't know what I sent. I didn't see writing on the disc that I sent, and I'm sorry if it was only the director's cut. But anyhow, the version that I saw was the one that is on VHS, and it's this very pithy, satirical, self-referential, prophetic little nugget of cinema couched within the genre of blaxploitation. And I thought it was just the most brilliant way for Sun Ra to connect with me and other people from, you know, beyond earthly existence. And it blew me away. I mean, it blew me away. What did you think, Ryan?
I will. I definitely will. One, I want to say we did watch Sun Ra's cut.
Yay!
Think minimal. I don't think there was any sex in that one.
Just a little bit, just a little thing at the very beginning, yes.
Right in the beginning, yeah, right in the beginning when all the wind was going on, he was demolishing the Chicago club scene.
Exactly.
From his piano playing. And I also my first experience with this film was from the VHS. And so I'm glad that that's what I connected with. But I also agree. I think that it was as accessible as it was strange. And I think that there were characters put in place to wherever you are on the space, whether you kind of are right on board with what he's saying, you're kind of at odds with like, this is a strange man, or maybe you're just like that NASA guy. Maybe you're just some kind of white collar, you know, person that like, I don't know who he's talking with. I think there was a space to be found in that entire screenplay. At first, when I first saw it, I really thought it was this kind of scattered, non-linear piece where like, I truly did not understand like the tarot cards with like judgment and all of this. And like, this is just the wildest thing. And then, you know, I'm pretty sure that was June Tyson, who I didn't know at the time, singing. I was like, this is wild. But every time I rewatch it, I something else starts to speak up. And I'm glad that you spoke to the screenwriter, because in understanding that Sun Ra said his lines and wrote all of his lines, I was trying to figure out where his construction or agency stopped and where the the process of film and, you know, the credits and the crew came in. So I have a couple questions, but I don't know if they're going to fall flat because I don't know if Sun Ra had say so in like the minutia of the film. I would say the first part, like the Chicago scene in '43, the significance of 1943. Is there? I'm just asking you because you might just carry more information than myself.
Sun Ra got to Chicago in exactly the same time that the Manhattan Project was launched underneath the soccer stadium at the University of Chicago. And it would have been a long walk, but you know, you could have walked from that first apartment that Sun Ra was in to where, you know, the first critical thermonuclear reaction. You know what I mean? There's this thing that's happening. So that was Sun Ra's reality in the early 40s as he was trying to, you know, make a name for himself, a talented, you know, brilliantly talented musician among many, many other brilliantly talented musicians. And it's never easy for people that if all they want to do is music, it's never easy. So Sun Ra would take, in Calumet, you know, the areas surrounding Chicago at the time were full of vice, and he would play for these mob-run strip joints. And, you know, Sun Ra, they said, you know, band members said that they saw him reading philosophy at the piano while he's, you know, playing for these dancers. They also put the black musicians who were playing, you know, Sun Ra could play any kind of music. So, you know, imagine what would fit a striptease act, a burlesque act in the mid 40s. And Sun Ra was pounding that stuff out. But they had the band because they were black musicians and lots of, you know, scantily clad white women. They had the band behind a sheet. You know, there's a divider on the stage that is, you know, preventing you from seeing that these and keeping the men from seeing the women as well. You know, so Sun Ra did that, and that's the early beginning part of Sun Ra's life. I know from talking to orchestra members that if you know, the orchestra was still doing, you know, when they were in New York, they were still doing weddings and stuff like that, you know, bar mitzvahs. You know, you're a well-connected entertainment person, you want to do something a little different for your kid's bar mitzvah, why not book the orchestra to do the party, you know?
Yeah, on that one is insane, but then it also makes sense that these are also very much, you know, just working class guys trying to do what they can. I think I was saying every time I'm watching this, I feel like more sorts of pours out or tries to show me. And the main thing that I took this time, and you were saying, it's like, it's kind of a meta commentary and kind of sarcastic and a little pithy. I was taking, you were talking about the mob boss, or maybe he's like the devil, or maybe he's is he like the music industry, and maybe they want to like, how do we sell him? What does he want to do? And what can he get? The symbolism from that one guy and what he encapsulates or embodies. This time I was looking at through the lens of like, oh, he's the label. You know, he is Atlantic, or you know, he's this guy, and so I put a smile on my face where like, okay, what is the one thing that Sun Ra wants to do? And he was like, how about a concert? You know, like that's the one thing that he really cared to do. And at first, you know, oh, is he selling out, or is this whole philosophy just for cold hard cash? That's what those two kids were talking to him about. I guess I was just really interested in the economy conversation.
Sun Ra ain't never going to sell out, you know.
Exactly.
Quote unquote. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's never going to sell out. And,
I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay. There's a thing going on. So
I'm aware. I can hear the thing.
Yeah. I don't. Do you want to take a break for a second and figure it out? Okay. No problem. Okay. So yeah, like even in the club situation is like, okay, well maybe as Sun Ra is playing these shows in in these kind of cabaret situations. And what maybe he wants to really do is translate what he's reading out of his fingers, right? Even though it's not music notation, maybe what he wants to do is to play that out into some regard, or maybe whatever he's writing. And at first he might be confined, he's not supposed to do that, but that one scene basically, to me, becomes the timeline of what he wants to do, right? Kind of create this portal, or for lack of a better term, like, I was gonna say violence. What I really mean is like to grab agency back for himself through music. And it feels like what his action word, his verb is music, right?
You get a historical arc of a person who in some way had to compromise themselves to get a foothold in the thing that they would use to take them beyond, any kind of compromise. It's interesting. I think that the film is done in the Bay Area. I think they shot it in like 72. The Black Panthers and their legal struggles are still very much in the air. Everything that the Bay Area represents in terms of cultural struggle and, differentiation of different identities and alternatives to pre-existing identities. Sun Ra in a lot of ways had a similar problem to Jimi Hendrix. And it was the plight of the Black cultural worker whose particular span of excellence, of direction, took it so far away from the central tropes of Black identity that it becomes controversial to mainstream Black people. So we know that Jimi Hendrix was playing, he was playing the blues through speakers, and understanding that all this electricity and wattage gave him an ability to bring the blues into the realm of almost a sound art. And Sun Ra looked at, tone science and what he was doing with electricity and synthesizers in much the same way. And as deeply anchored as Sun Ra is in a very authentic, very normal origin story in Birmingham, Alabama, in the segregated South, as he elaborates upon his own mission, his own sense of mission, what he is supposed to do, it takes him out of the orbit of, so many other things that have been at the center of how Black people define themselves culturally. So I saw through the film Sun Ra making a play for the kind of identification within mainstream Black folks' real lives that he thought he deserved. Sun Ra was a heck of an individual in terms of what he thought he was here to do and how he should be regarded. And you can laugh it off if you want to. And I think in some ways he wanted us to. There was a lot of subterfuge in his self-grandiose exposure to mockery, But I'm hearing myself echoing here, and I'm just trying to catch up with the echo. I think Sun Ra in this film really wants us to understand that he's the guy that shows up in the rec room with these ghetto young people, the epitome of who is marginalized and who is most disenfranchised by white supremacy, and all of the real things that are facing these young people. And in this rec center that has Angela Davis, Huey Newton on the walls, he's trying to make an inroad. He sees himself as being that guy. He's got a different formula that's not Dr. King and it's not Malcolm X. And he's saying, mine is really about liberation, and it's called Alter Destiny. And that kind of takes us to where why we're talking. It takes us to why this is important enough to do, especially on this day. I don't like to do shit on July 4th. I'll be honest with you. It's not a fun day for me. It's a day that celebrates, commemorates the defeat of Native people and the submission of African people. I don't see anything good about it. And then they top it off with this noisy celebration, noisy emulation of the sounds of the war, the Gatling guns that mowed down Native people, the shotguns that the runaways would hear in the distance with the hounds as they were trying to find their way north. There's nothing pleasant at all about it. But we're here to talk about how it is even possible that Sun Ra can be relevant to stuff that is as dangerously real as George Floyd having his life ground out of his body on a million billion different TV screens. This image is with everybody. How can this odd Black musician with this eccentric rap about ancient Egypt and outer space, how could he possibly be relevant to something that is as serious, not for play, as the death and danger that confront Black people, not just within this country, but, it's a global thing.
Yeah, I think he deals, for how out there people, color Sun Ra to be, I think he deals with a lot of material anxieties that he probably felt like, yeah, let me sit right next to and be nearby these photos of Huey Newton. Someone I saw, Amiri Baraka. Somebody was reading Black music in the book, in the movie, and I was like, look at that. But even with how the story plays out, it deals with so much of like surveillance, assassination, welfare, like the economy, homelessness. Like all of this is for however like, oh, we're in the space and we're dealing with a lot of these esoteric, transmolecularization. All of this wordplay, I think is really, again, what I was saying earlier, it is as accepting as it is esoteric. And I think he uses that tension to lure you in thinking this is a sci-fi thing, right? But in actuality, yes, it's a tool, a very material tool for liberation. And I mean, we were right at the end, Liz and I were just talking about how a lot of these concerns are still prevalent today. Even just looking at the images of when he was leaving alongside of the 3 or 4 people that he picked up, there were like dams kind of eroding and
that's right.
All of this infrastructure sort of just failing. And as much as he was addressing, the concerns of the Black race, which again is unfortunately just as prevalent, if not as accelerated as it is today. We're not only talking about surveillance, but like proliferation, like media proliferation, right? We all have to consistently, repetitively, almost ad nauseum endure this trauma. And we're never away from this kind of forever assassination. That doesn't look too dissimilar from how we look, or what we might look, how we might place ourselves in the ratio of an iPhone video, and all that resolution. I mean, it's just really discombobulating. And for him to approach that and to address this in 72 is as profound as it is unfortunate that not much has changed. But I'm grateful to look at that personally. I'm grateful to look at that and to see that there are elders and ancestors that have not just addressed, but have really sat with the tensions that we might otherwise think that, oh, this is a new thing because it's wrapped up in a new kind of technology. Well, no, like he was addressing technological anxieties and accelerations, geographically, anthropologically, even dealing with like Egypt and all that. He's just talking about so much that we still have to use him as a reference. He's not dated in any way. And I don't know, it really is just a showcase of just how on point he was.
Well, see, the trauma, the ongoing trauma, the trauma that's historical, the trauma that will happen next week, it constitutes the American condition. It's not a paradox, a contradiction. It is part of what makes it America again and again and again. I think it's unfortunate, and I can speak from, my generational positionality, that it's unfortunate that we adopt by default an acceptance that things today, after all, are only so much better than they were in 1972, which is a long time ago. And when this resurgence of awareness of a problem that never went away, there was never an interruption, there was never a pause, there was never a lag in police killing Black people. There wasn't like, oh, well, hey, that problem came back. No, we started talking about the problem again. Like there's cycles in fashion, And so there was a part of me that was deeply embarrassed that the things that we did, we, meaning, me in my younger years, in response to Eleanor Bumpers and, there were so many, Terrence Johnson here in Washington, D.C. All of these issues were addressed through a culture of protest that is all we're permitted within the real politics of American bourgeois democracy. That is, all paths for Black people eventually lead to the Democratic National Committee, unless you're willing, like Kanye West, to hug on Donald Trump, which I wouldn't recommend. I'm not trying to be pessimistic or overly cynical, but I'm saying what's beautiful about Sun Ra is that by giving us this term, altered destiny, he's trying to give us a way of breaking through language, because everything is, it's predicated on having some words to talk about it. So altered destiny for Sun Ra is a noun. And a noun can either be, it either exists or it doesn't exist. It refers to a thing, whether it's a conceptual thing or any other kind of fact. It either exists or it doesn't exist. Unicorns, I don't think they exist. UFOs, well, certainly the government now tells us that, yes, unidentified aerial phenomenon. We change language, we change acronyms. They do exist. They don't mean much, but they do exist. So Sun Ra says altered destiny is like, okay, you've been oscillating back and forth between, it's habitual. And if you're going to break the habit, you're going to do something that you can't anticipate. And this is it's a hard place to lead people into. It takes a certain kind of, Sun Ra did it with guile and with wit and with an incredible band and some of the most stirring, well-composed and arranged music in all of history. So he had a lot to work with. It's interesting to me that a guy who left the planet 28 years ago has suddenly become in vogue in this, way that transcended any amount of fame that Sun Ra got when he was able to speak for himself, take the stage and play. So the New Yorker gives us this article. Did you see this? New Yorker magazine, how Sun Ra taught us to believe in the impossible. And it's beautiful because it's an okay article to get you into the Sun Ra treasure chest of conceptual energy and food. But Sun Ra understood that the impossible, is a construct. And it's always deferential to some status quo. So when you talk about a world where there's no war, there's no money, there's no flags to bow down to or salute to or whatever. There's no, I mean, he really was an abolitionist, I think. He really had the spirit of someone who would let a lot of it go to see what else was possible. And I think it's obscene to think that 40 years from now, your kids, you'll be an old guy, and your kids will think they're discovering something new to get out in the street and to protest yet again some George Floyd that hasn't even been born yet. It's sad. And we accept that as that's the American condition. That's what makes this such a great country. Amnesia, and then you just cycle through the same thing that you've already lived. All genuine futurisms require some forgetting, to transcend. You have to let some of this shit go, man. And we're not being very flexible. The next person, that gets shot, and you'll have the same batch of leadership led by Al Sharpton telling us to get to the streets and to protest and to protest and to protest. And one side is running out of bullets while our side is like going through shoe leather. Now, we are in a dilemma, and I want to be like, there's some things implied here that I want to clarify. We are in a dilemma that's very similar to the Palestinian dilemma, in that we are explicitly not permitted the right to defend ourselves. We, Black people in America, all sorts of stuff we can do. But the thing that most people would do when they're under attack by violence, which is to shoot back, don't say that. And I didn't say it. I believe in nonviolent struggle. But struggle. I'm not a pacifist. So what can be done to suck the air out of your enemy's lungs without firing a shot or drawing any blood? That to me that's the thing, Ryan. That's what we're looking to your generation to figure out.
Yeah, I think the at least back then, and I don't even know if it even is still the case now, that tool was music. I think it was a disruption. I think it was beginning before, sort of late stage capitalism began to get late, was that tangent line. I think the language that Sun Ra first spoke of with Law for Destiny, I think it was seemingly about to be a way out of the hamster wheel for a lot of people. And I don't know, I can get very cynical at times and thinking, it was a very regional thing. A lot of these moments in history didn't happen at the scale that we have to understand the world now. And I think that the whole Black Panther, even with all the chapters going everywhere, people still lament like Fred Hampton. That was a singular voice. James Baldwin, that was a singular voice. MLK, Malcolm X, all these people. And I think with the way of how we perceive the world now, like how our perception works, is it's just so large that the ways to combat the people on the other side, I'm thinking the Elon Musks, the Richard Bransons, the Bezoses, and all of that. I don't know if how culture can be used as a tool to produce material change. I think back then, music did kind of start that fire. I'm just at a loss for what that tool can be now. I know back in, I guess that was a decade ago now, people spoke, in Twitter, when Twitter popped up and like, well, the Egyptians are like the Arab Spring and all of that. That seems to be the last like vestige of what if we could use this for good? And then 15 years passed and we realized, this
TikTok.
could never be. Yeah, now it's TikTok.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's no way. And I something has to happen. And because, the walls are closing in. I'm even looking at, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, no. So in a nonviolent paradigm, it's kind of like a weapons race. It's kind of like, if we let them get that quantum computer and chip everybody, game over. So now we're looking for cultural tools that have a lot of bang in them. They have a lot of they have impact. Okay. So that being said, why is this generation? I don't want this to come off the wrong way. I'm using words metaphorically. I'm using this genre metaphorically. Why is today's woke generation listening to neo soul?
That's a great.
Why is the aesthetic, musical aesthetic, of a movement that's going to, rack the foundations of the world, why does it sound so pleasant? Why does it sound so, retiring and groovy and accessible? And, it's great, picnic music in the park, but it's not what, unless somebody's lying to me about what all this woke stuff means, that's not what we're doing.
I think that, and I agree. I don't think that that's a tool for protest. I think that's a tool for like insularity, or like the idea of, we were just talking about, the scale is so large, and I think people are so confused that I'm not caping for anybody or anything, and I'm interested of what this neo soul might be, if you want to address examples. But I think it's ultimately this idea of, I think a lot of people are lost, and the goal is to maybe just like try to find yourself in a world that is crumbling at a very accelerated rate. And if you can find happiness while everything is crumbling, then that's good enough. Because like, I think we've seen multiple apocalypses, right? To the point to where maybe the real end of the world is the end of apocalypse. Like, there is no more world ending. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a lot of people have sort of resigned to being like, okay, well, this is the third time I've seen the sea on fire this week. Maybe if I go out in the streets, what does that do? Let me like, how many plastic straws can I like, what does recycling do anymore? What does going on the street do anymore? I think at this point it's like, well, damn, let me just like light an incense and let me at least find happiness. I'm not saying that is a goal, but I can understand the reaction to watching and then looking back at all of these multiple ends of histories, right?
It's very selfish, though, don't you think? Because somebody's going to live in it. Somebody's going to live in what our consumption leaves. Like the cinder that we are rapidly turning planet Earth into is, I've got a granddaughter and she's got to live in that. And she's like all cute and sweet and everything. I don't want her living in that, And, and then the other thing that's like logical is you create a situation that drives elitism to even more absurd extremes, because the only way to live a halfway decent life will be to have such enormous sums of money that you'll have to create imbalances that are, way beyond even what we're complaining about now. So we'll go from like the 1% to the, 0.1%. And everybody else will be kind of in, Mad Max land out here. That's cynical. I'm an optimist. I want to find, I'm a mad scientist, and I work with loud music and my voice and words and code, and I want to find ways that, like, all this stuff is supposed to be connected. I want to feed something back into the matrix that turns the bitch off. And I want people to get in their laboratories and help me, and I feel like I'm helping them. I feel like it's to some extent, it's a united front of related artists. That's why we're talking now. We're not talking to ourselves. We're and we're not talking for the sake of talking. I'm not. We're talking because there are people that will listen. And, Sunrise said, turn or burn. There are people that will listen, maybe some small percentage, and say, okay, I got it. I'm going to either keep going the way I'm going, or maybe, Sunrise said you have two options, the in or the out. Try the out.
I
Hyper creativity.
I think it's hyper creativity. It's also this idea of hyperstition. I don't know if have you ever, someone that word just came to me like 3 years ago, and it's really been something I've held on to. This idea of if you believe in something, you can almost create it into a material sense, right? I think the easiest idea of that is like religion. Like religion is a hyperstition, right? It's like if there's this collective belief that this thing exists, then it truly becomes a truth. It becomes a material thing for as long as it maybe works out for a particular cohort. And so I do agree that there is an in and that there is an out, but I think there needs to be a collective belief to produce that out, to create that door. And as it stands right now, I think unlike the 70s, even the 80s, and I'll go as up to the 90s. I just think that the material cost of thinking, of believing, was available to a wide enough cohort, right, the working class, to have the time, literally the time, to think and to imagine and to believe. And I think now, even though things are like to consume, those certain things to consume are cheaper than they've ever been. You want to buy like nuggets or get a shirt or anything like that to buy and to consume as low as it's ever been. Very material benefits like healthcare or rent, or the opposite side being the minimum wage, have been as low as they've ever been, connected to, okay, now you work 60 to 80 hours a week. Where do you find the time to sit down and to think about Alter Destiny Part 2? Where do you find the time to get your group of people and to produce an orchestra that can create a rebellion in whatever way or waveform that can be? And I think how I've come to see it, and I agree. I hope that I'm an optimist too. I hope I'm not sounding.
I think this is real talk, and I think it's necessary. I'm listening.
Okay. I do think that this idea of we do need room to imagine, but first we need the room. In the room right now, we're either getting kicked out and getting gentrified out, or we can't even pay rent. And as much as I was talking earlier about Sundar's, connections with material anxieties, what wasn't lost on me is just looking at San Francisco, Oakland, just in the 70s. Like I've been there and I've never seen that San Francisco. I know a very, very different San Francisco, Oakland. And there won't be room for 14 to 15 Black kids to play ping pong in the middle of Oakland. Like it's just not happening anymore.
They better have some loot.
They better. And I think that that's where I am right now. And so when I see people just kind of reverting back to, well, let me light an incense in this room because I just need to calm down, is we need to first, in my opinion, really address these material concerns before we can find that out, because we don't even have the tools to even think about.
But how do you address, where's the handle for addressing the material concerns? Is it in or out?
I think the tools, oh man. I think so. I think the tools are in the room. I think the tools have always been there, but like you're saying, I think that there is a analogous to the open air prison that the Palestinian people are in. And I think it does take this global effort that, I think it takes more than the inmates to get out of the prison. I think back then it was like TV, right? You were seeing a lot of Black folk getting like hosed down. And I think a lot of people were realizing like, oh, this is bad. This is really terrible. We need to do something about this. And there was this global concern of the atrocities that we're seeing on TV, but now we've gotten desensitized to it. And I think later that became music, and maybe even later at the same time, it was like the Black arts movement and like poetry at the time. And we were kind of in lockstep for a while of getting ahead of this sense of scale. And I think the big question, which I have no answer to, is what can be that thing to get ahead of Blue Origin, Amazon, Tesla, to disrupt that? There needs to be a disruption. I think the tools are around us. I just don't know if it's going to be a saxophone again. I don't know if it's going to be a Moog synthesizer this time again. I'm just not sure.
Is refuse and resist an adequate response? Is there a way that we unplug from, that which, is boxing us in? And I say that wondering if I might even have an Amazon delivery on the front porch right now. I don't know. So, you know what I mean? Maybe that's where the energy needs to be directed at. Is there life beyond the grid that oppresses us? Is there life beyond this this matrix that limits things, but also opens them up? Or is the pretense one of reverse colonization, where an apparatus that was put in place to funnel resources and energy in one direction, somehow you create a situation where the energy is flowing back, back in the other direction? And is that feasible? Is the machine built up in such a way that you can reverse the flow like that?
I'm gonna get an echo. Sorry, hold on. Is that working? Can you press mute? I'm so sorry. I remember.
Actually, I'm loving it. It's like a little concert in the middle of the interview.
Okay. Hey, I'm good. Okay, so I'll wait till the mute is done. Okay, so I think to answer that question, I do think that it does. I think it's going to have to be, if I'm just brainstorming, I think it's going to be degrowth. I think the only way to battle scale is to, you said remove, refuse, resist. I think things are going to have to get smaller. I think that we are going to have to less than boycott, but just like completely remove. Like there's this big conversation in the music industry, like what are we going to do with Spotify? And like I don't think there is anything to do except the obvious question, which is just stop. I don't think that there's a comfortable alternative. I think there is only the antithesis. And I'm not sure if there's a way to do that and for us to not change our way of life as it stands now. That's how I see it. So if we're talking about degrowth and talking about Amazon, all these places, I think that it is just like, I'm out of this loop. I'm no longer a part of this ecosystem and I'm creating my own ecosystem. And that can be truly just doing like, I love the way like there's community refrigerators and community gardens. And I just think the world has to get smaller again. Like I was saying, with like how moments in history really were like 5 people at any time. We're talking about, again, the Black Arts Group, the Black Arts Movement, talking about Rosa Parks, so like even the Baton Rouge boycotts back in the day. These are very, the Deacons for Defense, this is small people. This is not like, how many followers did they have? That was not part of the conversation. And so I do think that the way that worked is because it was focused, it was careful, there was an idea of sufficiency and sustainability. And the way scale is now, even at a geological sense, no one is thinking about sustainability, we're just thinking about scalability. And I think we just need to cut that out at the head. And that's a real sacrifice that I know nothing of, but I think that's where we might have to head.
Can I ask you a question? Can we still be, international and connected with each other in this new smaller world? Because like we're talking to each other through Zoom, they're not, they're not everybody's best friend. And we're able to have this relationship across a bunch of miles because of this machine that you're saying we should unplug from. Is there a way to have everything get smaller without becoming just parochial in the process? Is globalization only what the corporate thing has accomplished for us and nothing else? Because I think it's something else. I mean, I think it's powerfully important that Harry Belafonte records, and someone was talking to me a few minutes ago about Hugh Masekela records, were a part of my early listening life because they had a market. Someone found a market for this music from afar, um, among, just mainstream radio listeners. I, I want to walk as far down that road as I can until I find myself in a cave and cut off again and stuck with whichever 5 or 6 people I've chosen to be with, because I may not like them anymore after I've spent a lot of time with them. But I love smaller. I love the idea of like scale is a problem. It is a problem.
I agree with you. I think that there's a balance. nothing is rooted in the binary. And maybe we can sort of squat in this place until they kick us out. But yeah, I think inconvenience is going to be a part of the future. And if we can have any say-so in that before we don't have any say-so in it, like, love to everybody in the Pacific Northwest, they're dealing with a lot of inconveniences in terms of temperature. And we are in terms of like sea level rise. I think that if there's anything that we can do before we can't do anything, then we should. I feel the same thing. It's almost like you ever on your phone and it's about to die, but you don't want it to die on you without you being like, you know what, 1%, I will have the self-restraint to put my phone away because I don't want to be on it until it dies. I think we just need to do that. I think, you know what I mean? Like at some point we need to get our fill and go, okay, we're done. And yeah, maybe we won't have the generous use of Zoom forever like this. Maybe it might be a bit more inconvenient, but I don't know how we do this at this scale, at this population.
At the risk of sounding like self-promotion, at the end of The Execution of Sun Ra, my wonderful book from 2014, I suggested an external force. There we go. Thank you, sir.
Got you right here.
I suggested an external force like a coronal mass ejection that would, literally fry the grid across vast swaths of the globe might be the only thing that actually can cause the kind of interruption, the kind of mass retreat from technology that you're suggesting. Is that in your calculus as well?
I mean, I don't think I'm addressing like anarcho, like primitivism. Like, I'm not like talking about like the return to nature. Let's start just like cutting down trees and building. But I just think that the scale of which everything has become devalued, I think that we need to sacrifice that devaluation. Like, again, I'm talking about Spotify or Bandcamp. I just think that we need to maybe start paying for things again and start like not paying, Jeff Bezos and crew to do that thing that might take a little bit more to, for that to get to our home, to get to our house. Maybe like farmers markets instead of Walmarts. I'm just saying like we just need to, if we all take care of each other, I'm not talking about in terms of proximity necessarily, but if we just start thinking about that as real praxis, I think we can go much further to produce sustainability. I'm just talking about caring for each other. And I think the individualism that I think capitalism has kind of rooted into us to where we can all just kind of stay home and do whatever we want and not care about our neighbors has kind of permeated into our everyday to where we have things like Spotify to where, we can complain, but what do we have to give to produce? I think we need to start sowing real seeds. And I think that's where I'm at.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I don't know. I have this idea that bringing, like people talk in terms of conservation and, how it would be tragic if their, grandchildren couldn't see tigers in the wild. Like, who gets to see a tiger in the wild? But I think that there's a project awaiting the species that involves not just like keeping things from getting any worse, but actually, restoring things, bringing things back to it's saying like they were isn't necessarily the point, but bringing it back to where it's a functional living system again. And that involves a lot of discipline and a lot of creativity. And it also takes knowing what exists, like I always try to find within talks like these an opportunity to remind people that being in nature in a very conscious way, a conscious way that is personal and is about you and that environment, that situation that is absent of what humans do to deform situations, that can be a very powerful place to find all sorts of things that are very, very, very useful and belong, they belong to you. They're not constrained by or conditioned by some cultural thing. It's you and, the world of botany and atmosphere and wind and sky, actually, communicating. And I wish, especially urban people that don't live where those kinds of environments are easy to access, I wish that they would. I wish that that was a part of what people had to build from, was that relationship of just being where you're conscious of what's there and what's there without any help from human beings, and it kind of, I think it will help you develop the kind of internal plasticity where it's not really difficult to imagine doing without whatever it is, Amazon or, YouTube or Netflix or whatever. And I think our creativity is the thing that's supposed to fill the gaps, the thing that is supposed to, become the new culture when we don't have this machine feeding us such large amounts of what we digest culturally.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that nature is its own portal, as music and poetry is. So it maybe if we take a walk in the forest, we can, produce our own myth making and maybe create our own sort of hyperstition.
Sun Ra was all about that. He was all about nature's God and really appreciating the music that's already there. Ryan, and yes, we Cannibal people, Matt and Liz, I'm always appreciative to be in your space and doing stuff with you. I'm actually in Out Music, which is also known as Bill's Firehouse, but it's full of stuff right now, so we couldn't do the big public event. So it's just a few people here, and really thankful to have an opportunity to talk to you about all of these things that we got to. I really do appreciate it, and heard you. You said some really powerful things that need to be brought to the fore. So,
as did you. Thank you so much. And we're gonna close the broadcast, but let's talk off broadcast for just 5 or 7
I'll hang out.
minutes.
I'll be right here.
Yeah, we'll just hang out. But no, thank you so much for the talk, Thomas. It's always a pleasure to rap with you.
Thank you. Go listen to some Sun Ra music, people.
Yes.
Right on.